La Cigarra, con nuestra invitada, with our guest, Linda Ronstadt. Bienvenidos, welcome to the 2023 Tucson Festival of Books. This panel, welcome home, Linda Ronstadt, will end in an hour. Please take your questions from the panelists until they have spoken. We'll reserve about 15 minutes or so for some Q&A. The festival organizers thank Tucson Medical Center and TMC Health for sponsoring this location, and the Arizona Daily Star for sponsoring this discussion. Make sure you stop by the book sale area, and Lawrence will be there to sign books. Book sales at the festival help support the cost of the festival and the local literacy programs it funds. You can also help keep this event free and open to everyone by becoming a friend of the festival or a sponsor of the festival. Please stop by the Friends booth or go online to TucsonFestivalofBooks.org. And please silence your phones, includes me. Oh my gosh, are you nervous? We acknowledge the land that we are on, a land that was occupied by the first peoples. It is honest admission that there were peoples here before us, and before others came and took what was not theirs. We also acknowledge that the land itself, the land that sustains us, the land that we need to care for. After all, we are the land's present and temporary guardians. Before we talk with Linda and Lawrence, before we hear them wax about the land, its people, let's set the proper table for our Plática de la Frontera. Let's set the mood about cultura and memories. So 4 years ago, we were on a trip to Banamichi, Sonora, and I brought back a bottle of Bacanora from Banamichi. You're going to be hearing a lot of Banamichi in our Plática. Lawrence is a writer, an editor, and former newspaperman. His career stops include the Chicago Sun-Times, Newsday, New York Times, where he was an editor and editorial writer. His first book was There Is Just Us, a 50th anniversary history of Special Olympics and the battle for inclusion for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. With photographs by Bill Steen, Linda's longtime friend from Canelo, the book is lush and gorgeous, like the songs we have come to love and appreciate. Linda needs no introduction. Linda es nuestra hija. She is the daughter of Tucson. Thank you, Linda and Lawrence, for being here this afternoon. Banamichi is a special place, whether you are a Ronstadt or not. Those of you who have read Feels Like Home know something about Banamichi and the place it holds in Linda's heart and soul. She wrote, I have never had a home in Sonora, and I get homesick for it. I feel pride in the connection, more than I do in San Francisco, where I have lived for years, and as much as I do in Tucson, the town I was born and raised in, 5 hours up from the highway from Banamichi, and in another country. Basically, the same Sonoran ground, but with extra layers of development and money. Linda, please tell us more. Share with us the beauty of the town, the land, and its people that we have come to appreciate. Banamichi. I want the two of you to talk about the town, how special it is.
I'm really hard of hearing, so I didn't hear anything he said. Translate.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard to hear, but basically what I'm saying, what we're talking about, Linda, is what place Banamichi has in your heart and why that's the center of this book that we put together.
Oh, that's because that's where my grandfather was born. And my father used to take me there and show me where they used to live. It feels like a connection to the land.
It's I don't know if any of you have been down to the real Sonora first started this project, Linda and I, we didn't know exactly what direction it was going to take. It started as a cookbook, and then it kind of morphed beyond that. But Linda was always very clear that she wanted to start the book at a specific place, with her sitting on the bench.
Well, I had that experience. I went to Banamichi, and they have a beautiful central plaza. And it's so pretty and clean, you didn't off the sidewalk. And I was sitting there one morning, I was looking across at the church, the stairs in the plaza. And it occurred to me that that would be where my great-grandmother would have taken my grandfather to be baptized. And that's when she would have gone to Mass. And I started thinking about her as a young woman arriving in Banamichi with a much older married man. She was married to a much older man, his second language was Spanish. He spoke German. And he had several children when they married. He was a widower. And I thought, what would her life have been like in that village, in that ecosystem, in those politics at that time? What did she endure raising children? What was her life like? We found, I did some research and found a bunch of her letters, years on to the Historical Society, and the year at the university. And so finally this woman that I'd only seen in photographs had a voice. And that's what started the book. And a trip that we made with Ernesto and Lawrence and Jackson Brown and who else went? Oh, Bill's team. We all made the trip together and decided to write a book about that trip.
Lawrence, after all these years collaborating with Linda, have you adopted Banamichi? What do you tell your East Coast friends and your Hawaiian family about Banamichi?
You kind of don't want to tell them too much because you want the place not to be overrun. You want to keep it powerless. But yeah, it's pretty magical. It was quite an experience for me, not having much knowledge of or experience of Sonora, the real Sonora, to find out how absolutely beautiful it was. My only impression, my only knowledge of Arizona before these trips and this project was Phoenix.
And he says it, right? He admits it.
I can't hear you. You're just trying to.
Well, you don't want to hear what he said.
Oh. Yeah. Sheriff Arpaio, brilliant.
Linda made reference to a trip that she took with a large group in February of 2019 to Banamichi. But years before that, in December 2013, the New York Times published a story written by Lawrence about a trip that he took to Banamichi. And he wrote, "We are driving outside Naco, Arizona, near the Mexico border, on a 2-lane backtop under a half moon and stars. The distant mountains are lost in shadow, and there's not much to look at beyond the headlights, beams, and the rolling highway stripes. In the middle seat of the minivan, Linda Ronstadt is talking about her childhood."
Our first trip, it must have been shocking to you to see the starkness of the desert. And it looks like such a harsh environment, but really the Rio Sonora Valley is the most fertile land in all of Mexico. It's like the San Joaquin Valley in California. And it grows amazing amounts of stuff. It was the wheat belt. It was the Ukraine of Mexico. And the vegetables and fruits taste so good there. They taste like no other place. The chilies have their own flavor, and they have great varieties of wheat that they grow that still have flavor, unlike the varieties of wheat we grow here, which are ready to sit on the shelf for 9 months. So it's an extraordinary place. People sew anything by hand. People do their own work. They raise cattle and they raise crops. And it's just a very abundant part of the desert.
And it is a place where you can find Chief Venus, growing wild, one of the hottest chivas that we know of. I believe, Linda, the trip was the last time you've been in Banamichi, correct? The last time you've been there? And this this trip was part of the documentary, the CNN documentary, The Sound of My Voice. The question, Linda, has that trip taken on a different meaning for you today, 4 years later, as you look back?
Problem with getting old being deaf. It's not funny. Well, it's just that when you connect back to generations or generations of your family, our book contains 5 generations of Ronstadts, and like it or not. It's, when you know what your great-grandmother went through to get to where she got to have the person that had you, it means something. She went through she endured a lot, and she survived it and even flourished at certain times. So I admire her for that, and I admire what my grandfather had to go through too. As we read his letters also to his wife, my grandmother, who was begging her to marry him. So it's a love story, and it's an intergenerational story.
To get a deeper and clearer understanding of the Ronstadt history in Sonora, I urge you to read Borderland, memoirs of Federico Jose Maria Ronstadt. Came out initially, you're not going to believe this, on University of New Mexico Press. Why? This book was edited by Linda's uncle, late Edward Ronstadt, and the book is completely centered on the diary that her grandfather compiled over the years in the Ronstadt hardware store in downtown Tucson. Now, Linda's love affair with Bananachi, situated along the Rio Sonora, where her abuelo, Federico, was born, sprouted years before the stunning success of the 1987 landmark album, Canciones de mi Padre, which remains the most popular non-English language album today. Years before her great American songbook classics was Nelson Riddle and her dance with pirates from the land of Penzance, and years before her legendary rock period, which started with the Stone Ponies, after she left Tucson on her journey of simple dreams, years before that, Linda was in love with her raíces sonorenses, Tucsonenses, her Sonoran Tucson roots. And that love is rooted in music and food and family. Food. Yum. Your favorite restaurants and recipes. There are about 20 recipes in the book. You have a favorite?
We're talking about favorite tortillas. In all the places, in Mexico, in northern Mexico, they make them this big. And they taste delicious. And they make them with lard, so they really taste good. You know how it goes on the griddle and you put a little butter on it and you order a butter burrito. It's really good, but the food that they make down there is slow cooking to the extreme degree that they grow everything first. Then they process it after they have to process it and put it on your plate right out of the field. And it's cooked with a certain intent. Like when somebody's making you a taco and they have to be at their job for 8 hours and they have to make tacos for 8 hours and then they go home and find something they like to do. That's different from the intent of making tacos to make tacos. Make the good, best tacos that you make. And that's what you have down there. There are women that open their kitchen to the cowboys that come in for lunch. And everybody knows who the best cook is. And you go in there and they're cooking on a wood-burning stove, but the food is better than anything you ever had because it's so fresh. And it comes from such fertile soil. So it's just a different way of looking. It's an interesting thing. An American rancher will buy thousands of acres and put his home in the middle of it. And he's isolated and his wife slowly leaves him. But a Mexican cowboy lives in the village and they share the grazing land all around, so that the morality is kept to a high standard, because if you steal your neighbor's TV, you won't help you put your fence up. So it's a very cooperative society, and a very high moral standard.
Lawrence is going to wax a little more about tortillas.
I wondered if you wanted to hear something from the book about the Sonora tortilla. Ask a homesick Sonoran what they miss eating, and they will tell you about the tortillas. As big as bicycle wheels, as light as cotton, flaky and tender as fine pastry, and all but non-existent in other parts of Mexico or north of Tucson. They are a dreamlike memory from the saguaro lands. The Sonoran tortilla, also called a water tortilla, sobaquero tortilla, or just big tortilla, is made from nothing much: flour, water, fat, and salt. How these plain components can be so flamboyantly transformed is a glorious mystery. How can something so huge be so delicate? How can something so delicate be so huge? If pizza dough could dream, this is what it is. Thin enough to see through, strong enough to wrap a burrito. Watching a Sonoran tortilla being made is like witnessing a master sleight of hand card trick. No props, no tools, just bare-handed magic. A woman picks up a ball of dough a little bigger than a golf ball. She slaps it back and forth between her palms, fast enough to blur the action, hard enough so the ball flattens a little with each impact. Slap, slap, like a gentle round of applause. With each slap, she turns the dough slightly. Each turn stretches it a little. The sphere is now a disc, and it's growing. Now it's a saucer, a plate, a frisbee, but it's only just getting started. Now it's big enough to drape over her forearm. She stretches and twists it, using her fingers a little here and there to pull it into a circle, tossing and flapping it back and forth and into the air. The tortilla gets lighter as it gets bigger. Slap, flap, and turn. Flip, flop, and fly. Other tortillas get their shape through brute submission. A lump of corn masa gets squashed between the metal discs or wooden slabs of the press. A standard flour tortilla is flattened with a rolling pin. The Sonoran tortilla, on the other hand, is born in the open air, on the fly, across an arm, tossed and stretched all the way from fingertips to shoulder. Hence the crude nickname sobaquero, armpit tortilla. When the tortilla is big enough, the cook lays it gently across the fire-heated dome of a steel comal where it bubbles and blisters and stretches in the heat. Her fingers test the edge and give it a quick flip to cook the other side, and then it's done. Seconds ago, the dough was cold rubber. Now it's hot silk. She folds it and adds it to the pile, and then, like the god of Genesis working in clay, picks up another ball of dough.
Lord, not to put you on the spot, but you're here, and I want to ask you, have you and your wife Pat recreated any of the recipes in your Long Island home? Or better, the question is, have you recreated one of the recipes for Linda?
We've tried. I've tried. You may have detected already from our conversation that the meticulous attention and precision that Linda brings to her music, she also brings to eating and savoring delicious food. So she's very particular, and it's scary. I can imagine it's scary to play for Linda. It's very scary to cook for Linda. She had a bread recipe that we tried many times to recreate from her hippie days in Malibu, and I never quite got it right, adjusting the level of molasses and honey and wheat flour and white flour. It just wasn't the same.
Are you talking about how I can cook?
We're talking about how I can cook for you as well. We had a reporter from Vogue come to Linda's house in San Francisco, and we were going to make a Sonoran feast with recipes from the book. And one of the recipes is peppery beans, unique or common to this area, but not much else, nowhere else in the world. Very, not nearly as famous or as well known as pinto beans. Linda's favorite breakfast in the world is eggs and pinto beans and serrano chilies and salsa. But
tortillas.
Mommy tortillas.
But I made teparies for her, refried tepary beans, and Linda was very polite, tasted them, and she said, I really like pinto beans. We did our best, but teparies can't hold a candle to the pinto. So we've tried, and it can't help but be delicious because it's Sonoran, but when you're dealing with something, you have to be really on top of your game.
As one last note about tortillas, and we'll move on. One of Linda's childhood musical heroes is Tucson-born Lalo Guerrero. And Lalo has a song called There Are No More Tortillas, which I hope Linda doesn't have to sing from time to time. Now, while we all love Sonoran food, let's talk music. Yeah. Specifically, música mexicana, Mexican music, the huapangos, the rancheras, the boleros, supported by the vibrant mariachis, or a single guitar causing us to gently weep. Linda has an integral role in the development of mariachi music in this country. As I mentioned earlier, in 1987, her album Canciones de Mi Padre was a stunning success, which inspired thousands of girls to emulate Linda as a grand ranchera singer. And even before that, in 1983, she attended the first Tucson International Mariachi Conference, where her musical idol, Lola Beltran, performed, and Linda later, a few years, performed at the Mariachi Festival. Tucson is the birthplace of mariachi movement, and Linda has an important role in that development and maintaining that music. The question is, how does it feel to be the queen of mariachi music?
I was just trying to be a groupie. But I love the mariachi so much. And I love Lola Beltran. She was one of my main influencers as a singer. And I just wanted to figure out a way I could get close to them and maybe they'd teach me something. You know, and they wouldn't just totally look at me and scorn. Actually, they never heard of me. So it worked out. They didn't know who I was, so I asked them if they'd make a record with me. But we figured it out, and we made a record together. Just frankly, I didn't really know what I was doing. And then for the second record, I knew more, so it made a better record. But it was fun doing it, and the experience, people said, oh, isn't it the experience of a foreign country, the United States versus Mexico? I didn't know that the real cultural exchange between Mexicans and Mexican Americans. It was so to see what the environment had done to the environment and the culture had done to Mexicans after they migrated up here, how they changed, how they integrate themselves, how they work in the culture. It's like you have three different countries: in Mexico, United States, and Mexican Americans. And they'll have their own styles and their own music and their own philosophies.
Lawrence, in the time you've been working with Linda, you of course knew of her before you began working with her, and then since worked with her, collaborated with her on this project. Your impressions of her, your image of her, how did they change from before to today? You've got to know her very intimately. You know things about her that maybe we don't know. I'm not asking you to disclose it, but but no, it's the question, how has your image of her changed?
I'm going to really pinch myself when this is all over. It's been a wonderful several years working on this project. We've been working on the book together in earnest since about 2020, since the beginning of COVID. So this is our COVID project, although we've known each other for longer. And when I tell folks, this is this amazing thing. I don't know too many or any celebrities, and I certainly don't know anyone as famous or as well loved as Linda. And to know her and to get to know her better, you run the risk of getting maybe too close to your heroes. But the more I know Linda, the more I love her, and the more I respect and admire her. One thing I've told her is that She could have had another career as a writer and an editor, because you may not know that her first memoir, Simple Dreams, Linda wrote entirely herself, sitting in the living room by the coffee table, writing every word.
Yeah, we would sometimes write apart and sometimes write together, but sometimes we got trouble. I was writing a part about my friend Dr. Peterson, and I described her eyes as crinkly. And Lawrence was reading in something he had written to me, where he described somebody as crinkly, and I said, I got crinkle first.
Yeah.
There were two places that talked within the book, in Lawrence's page, he stuck twice. And our editor took them out. So he was reading to me and said, hey, what happened to fuck? He said, well, the editor thought it was bad. I said, no, you need it. In certain cases, you have to have it. I got 2 bucks and I got your crinkle.
Yes, there are 2 F-bombs in the book. This is an example of the creative process with Linda.
Such a good word if you use for a noun, a verb, adjective.
They were used, they were appropriate, but the copy editor flagged them and just said, no offense, but the reader might be taken aback because this book is very elegant and it's lyrical, and then all of a sudden, so the 2 contexts, the 2 sentences are, there's one where we're talking about immigration and this amazing, depressing phenomenon that every group that arrives and settles here has to fight its way in to be included and to be part of the us, that's the USA. And then people who, descendants of immigrants, often forget the struggles that they went through. And I won't name names, Kennedy and O'Reilly, but they sanctify their own arrival and then they demonize the folks who came later. And there's a line in the book that says, it would be more honest if we called this country, the United States of who the fuck are you? And then the second example, when we're talking about the first incursions into northwest New Spain by the Spaniards, and how the first countries sort of came up, I guess by the Yaqui River, and they were repelled. And that was the first lesson that they learned. The Spaniards learned that the Sonorans were not a people to be fucked with. And so in both instances, we think the F-bomb is acceptable.
And one last note about music. A year ago, Linda was here in town for the renaming of the Tucson Music Hall to the Linda Ronstadt Music Hall. At that event that Linda was present, mariachi performed for her. And Linda began to walk off stage when the young singer, Giselle Aubrey, a senior at Pueblo High School with the Pueblo Mariachi Esplanda at Pueblo High School, broke out with Blue Bayou. Linda stopped, turned around to hear and to see Giselle. And Giselle walked over to her and serenaded her, cara a cara, face to face. And, oh my gosh, few tears. That's the kind of impact that Linda has had, again, on so many young women. Giselle was, all of 18, 19. Her parents listened to canciones. Her grandparents listened to canciones. And one last note, a couple weeks ago, my wife and I were at the Tucson Symphony at the Linda Ronstadt Music Hall, and the young soprano singer from Mexico came on stage and said, walking up and seeing Linda Ronstadt on the music hall gave me chills. Gracias, Linda. Thank you. More literature. Linda is not shy about vocalizing her opinions about our border, our immigration policy. A big part of it, if not the reason she was spurred on, was by the writings of our friend Luis Alberto Urrea, who could not be here because he has his own session right now, but his wife Cynthia is here with us. This is one of Luis's books, Into the Beautiful North, but I believe the book that did it for her and has done it for many people is The Devil's Highway. Highway and her activism.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Louis Uriah is a wonderful writer. He wrote a book called The Devil's Highway that was life-changing for me. Because I was living in Arizona at the time, an hour from the border, and I didn't realize they were putting up this horrific fence. And I knew that it was hard to get across the border. You had to do some swimming and hiding. But I didn't realize how cruel it was the journey across the desert. How people's shoes weren't adequate and they wound up full of thorns and blisters, or they'd step in cactus, or they'd fall off. They would travel mostly at night. They'd have to be careful of falling into a ravine or a gully or stepping on a snake. It was just a horrific journey. And he described so carefully the people that were undertaking the journey. There was one man who died in the desert with his son, his teenage son. Son died first and then he died. But he left writing behind saying that they just left Mexico, their ranch, where they were eating, they weren't rich or anything, but they were eating. And he wanted to do something really nice for his wife. He wanted to remodel her kitchen. So they thought that if they went and worked for a few weeks in the United States, they could get enough money to rebuild the kitchen. And they died trying. It was just heartrending. Babies are crossing with their mother. People that don't come from the desert don't realize what harsh environment it is. And you have to know, the rules, and you have to play by the rules in order to survive. But Louis Uriah wrote about it so compassionately. It's also an good novel. He wrote The Hummingbird's Daughter, which is a book I enjoyed a lot. But The Devil's Highway, I don't see how you can read that and not be touched.
It was partly through it was my covering of immigration for the New York Times editorial page that brought me to Linda, because as I only learned from this trip that it was Devil's Highway that kind of, I wouldn't say radicalized, but really heightened for her the tragedy of what was going on. So I learned when Linda and Dolores Huerta were marching against Arpaio Phoenix in, 110, 120 degree heat, it was really kind of a badass moment for Linda to take this step, to actually walk the walk, literally, in this fight against this wretched guy. And it impressed me a lot. That was our first encounter, and then we stayed in touch and led to this.
And again, to show Linda's commitment to her activism, she has agreed to help raise funds for the Pima County Justice for All at a March 7th reception at the Arizona Inn. Justice for All to provide Pima County residents who are facing detention or deportation access to a public defender. If you know someone who can attend, or if you can attend, please contact Margot Cowan, margot.cowan@pima.gov.
Yeah. The initiative that they're trying to get on the ballot. It says that everybody, migrants that are applying for asylum, deserve legal representation in court. When they get it, there's a lot of people that are doing it pro bono, like Margot Cowan, who's the hero. She's done a lot of work for migrants to get them legal status, and she does it for free. And she gets them legal status when they're represented in court, and they can present a good enough case, they usually get legal status. And that's what we need. We need way more of that, so that there's not these horrible buildups at the border. There's people coming from Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Ukraine. They're from all over the place, and it's just cruel to keep them in limbo for years.
So there's a really memorable line from Devil's Highway that Luis uses about all the things that are being done at the border when it becomes militarized, and he calls it the politics of stupidity. And to me it says a lot, like we do things that we think will work, but do great damage boxcars in the forest, things like that.
In a moment now, I'd like to open up some questions from the audience. I believe we'll have some microphones and some runners with your questions. And just last note on immigration and music. Linda's dear friend Jackson Brown has a beautiful song called The Dreamer that he sings along with two of the singers from Los Ensorles, which I should bring up. There's a chapter in the book dedicated to this wonderful youth group out of Northern California in the East Bay, Los Ensorles, which means mockingbirds. And Linda, in her very humble, very quiet way, for years has supported this youth group, Los Ensorles, in their musical journey, in their musical education. And again, quietly she has done this, raising money for them, giving them encouragement, visiting their practice center in Sao Paulo. And in the 2019 trip to Banamichi, the bus stopped at a motel in Nogales, Arizona to pick up the kids from the group. And I thought it was so touching that since many of the kids in the group are children of immigrant parents, some of them undocumented or previously undocumented, to go to the border and to see the barbarous razor-sharp coiled wire atop of a fence. And this is a very difficult and unsettling world that we're in. And Linda, again, thank you for your contributions and your activism and your support of Los Ensorles and Marisol and La Santa Cecilia, another group from California, just to exemplify how she continues to quietly support and encourage young people.
The Sonorans is a little group. I was with my daughter, and we were walking around the street in San Francisco. And we saw this little band, so I had my big show out, my big Mexican show, and we were taking a break for a couple of days. We were walking around the town, and we saw this little group of kids playing Mexican music. And they were playing really well, and they were also dancing. They had a little tarima, it's called, like a wooden box you can dance on and make sound, turns it into a percussion instrument. And the more I looked at it, the more they were playing real traditional music, and they were singing in the language they speak in Michoacan, can't remember what it's called. And I thought, well, who are these people? And I found out that it was a little cultural center from the East Bay, and they've been going for a couple of years. And they were teaching children traditional singing, dancing, and instruments, and visual art too. And it was a place where they live in a really funky neighborhood in Richmond, which is sort of a high crime area. And they had a place for kids to come after school, do their homework, have a healthy snack. They have a really good kitchen there. They make slow food. And learn how to play an instrument. Not to get up on stage and perform, but to share your sorrows and your joys with your family or with yourself. Some music isn't meant just to be played by yourself, some music is meant to be shared. And some people go on the stage and do it professionally, but that's not the point of music. The point of music is to find out things in yourself that you didn't know about. Maybe you're just binge. It's important for everybody else, it's important for everybody to play their own music and play their own instruments. Do your own singing, your own dancing, your own playing. And it's important to have professionals that aspire words are gone, to inspire you. Because if you do something to a certain degree of perfection, it's inspirational, but you don't have to do it, you just have to play music. So I recommend everybody to do their own music. Sing in the shower, get into it.
When we have time, another recommendation, YouTube. There's a beautiful video done a few years ago with Linda going to visit Los Ensorles with a singer whom I mentioned a moment ago, La Marisol, with the group of Santa Cecilia. Just a beautiful, beautiful video. How about some questions from you wonderful audience? There are about 1,000 of you, so we can only take 998 questions. How are we going to work this with the microphones? I'm sorry? You'll talk loud?
It's not a question, it's just a statement. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I still remember hearing a different drum. The same place in the kitchen, and now we live in Tucson. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mine is also a statement. We moved here in my senior year of high school. When I got out here, the best thing I found was that Linda Ronstadt lived here. Yeah, for 32 years I've followed you through concerts and everything else, and I've never been this close to staging you. Thank you for everything you've done for all of us.
Please ask her questions so she can share with us a story or two.
So Linda, growing up, it was you, Joni Mitchell, Carly Simon, Carole King, singing songs about love, and it's how I learned a lot about that. Do you listen to any of the young girl singers today, young women singers today? Do your children make suggestions to you about what to listen to?
Well, I mentioned one already, La Marisol.